Welcome to the Teach Joyfully podcast, where we talk about all things elementary teaching with some mom stuff thrown in. I'm Lisa Burns, a teacher success coach, veteran elementary teacher, and mom of 5. I'll be your host. Thanks for joining me. So let's chat about my COVID-approved essentials that I provide students with for math, both in person and at home. Manipulatives for math in the elementary level are essential, in my opinion. Why? Well, we know that brain research tells us that the more senses we can engage in learning something new, the better we retain the learning. So manipulatives do this for students. However, in our online environment, we have access to online manipulatives as well. And it's a great option many times. They can be very engaging. Students can find them very fun. But there's a problem, though. You lose all of the tactile and sensory experience along the way. Now, they sure are convenient, and they are COVID approved, right? Because students can use them on their own devices and not have to share things. But it's a huge loss for students memory-wise. So I try for a good mix of both online and physical activities for students. The same is true for manipulatives. I know this kind of throws a little wrench in the works sometimes because now you have to provide manipulatives, physical manipulatives for students. And how do you keep track of them? How do you make sure that they're clean? That's a big issue, isn't it? Well, I use printable manipulatives at this point. Not to say I never did. I always use some, especially for home use. But it's much easier now to do this for in-school use as well. It's something that you can put into individual baggies, and students can have them and use them as they need them and not have to worry about mixing and matching with somebody else and all of the cleaning involved in between. It takes advantage of both convenience and effectiveness. So is it as effective as some of the other manipulatives? No, but it is effective. It's much more effective than just an online manipulative. Do I still use the online manipulatives? For sure. We use a good mix, just like we do with any other activities for students. We use a mix of online activities and activities that they sit down and do and create and write. So it's the same thing, it's just in manipulatives. So what do I provide for students? Well, I provide things like hundreds charts, number lines, number trains, 10 frames, greater than and less than alligators, place value boards, base 10 blocks, all kinds of math games. There's tons of things that I provide to students that they can use depending on the unit that we're in. But how do you manage all that? And how do you keep it all straight so that if students are at home, they can access whenever they need? In our learning management system, I created a resources section. And in that resources section, it has all of these manipulatives as we use them throughout the year. So I load them in as we head into a new unit and there's something new I want the students to have. I just load them in and students can download and print as they need them. You can certainly print them off on cardstock for the classroom. I much prefer cardstock for these, but that doesn't necessarily have to happen. In the classroom, sometimes I have things that are laminated, but for individual student use, for some of the smaller pieces, I don't bother doing that. They're going to go in a baggie and eventually they'll go home. So you can do either, that's fine. I also have paper dice, spinners, paper coins, clocks, all kinds of things. But all of those are things that I use throughout the school year, and they're things they can go back to and use over and over again. The cool thing about having a resources section in your learning management system, whether you're online or in person or even a hybrid model, students can go back and download another one and print it off anytime they need to if they've lost pieces or can't find things. So it's always there. You can always reference it, and you don't have to search when parents are looking for another one. You don't have to search around. You simply can direct them to that spot and they can find it and take care of it themselves. If your students are in the classroom, you can simply have extra copies and give them a new one. They can cut it out, put it all together into a baggie, and you're good to go. When students are online, whenever I attach a new work packet, I also attach whatever new manipulatives that they'll need for that packet right in that packet so that they have it right there. But I also let them know, in addition, that it's in the resources section should they lose that, and they can always go back and grab it. So I'm hitting them up twice with it. They get it right when they need it, right at that moment with the work that they need it for, and then they're also going to have a copy of it available to them in my resources section. So that keeps them accountable and not searching for things for an assignment they need to do today that I've just assigned and they need something new for, but it also gives them the opportunity to go and grab another one if they lose it or can't seem to find it later on. So in class, I have a large gallon-sized baggie for each student, and there are smaller baggies with all of their manipulatives put down in there, and then they can keep them in their own bin. At home, I do recommend that parents do the same. If they can keep it in a large gallon-sized baggie and each individual baggie goes in there and it's labeled, then the students' things will stay together and it'll be much easier to find the things they need when they need them. Just like manipulatives, physical manipulatives in the classroom, whether I'm working online or in class with students, I give students a chance to play with the manipulatives and mess around with them a little bit before we get to work or after we get done. And I always make sure that students know they'll have their opportunity. Why do I do that? Well, if I don't, and students don't know that they're going to get a chance to do that or haven't gotten a chance to do that, they're going to do it anyway because they're curious. And so, of course, they're going to play with those things, but they're going to do it while they're supposed to be working with you instead of at a time that's more appropriate. So they're going to lose some learning time and some focus. So rather than do that, you'll have to gauge by your class. Sometimes some students need it before you even get started. They simply can't hang on long enough. Other kids can wait until the end and know that at the end, you'll give them a couple minutes to really have some fun with it. When you use online manipulatives, there's also some rules that need to go around that as well. If your students are working with online manipulatives while they're working with you, then you need to have rules around when they need to be on the manipulative and when they need to be focused on you. It's really hard to do that at the same time because students have to flip back and forth between screens in order to do that. And when that's the case, it's really easy to lose them. So I highly recommend that they have something physical that they can use in the meantime and then use that online manipulative for their own learning time as opposed to in-class time. It's great for demonstration purposes, but it's not so great for working purposes when you're all together and trying to work. And one last thing that you need to make sure that you train students on is that when you're using paper manipulatives, whether they're paper or cardstock, you need to train students on how to put them away, just like you would any other manipulative. Why? Well, because you're not just jamming them in a bag. If you've ever given students something to put into a baggie, what do? They don't gently put it in the baggie if you just tell them to. They jam it in the bag and it gets wrinkled and curled up and it becomes a hot mess. Teaching students how to put these things away so one, they've accounted for all the pieces, and two, that they haven't jammed it into the bag and completely messed it up so that they're constantly trying to flatten them in order to be able to use them. So teaching students how to put them away and how to take them out so that they're preserving the life of these manipulatives and their usability. I have a cheat sheet for you with a list of all the manipulatives that I use and a couple of free printables in there so you can print a few of them yourself for free. I have a link to that and some other resources for you that pair with this episode in the show notes on my website at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. So that's it, my teacher friends. We're out of time and I'm out of breath. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you liked today's episode, I'd love it if you'd go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen and leave a review. And while you're there, hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss an episode. Also, you can continue the conversation online with me in my Facebook group, the Teach Joyfully Podcast Community, where elementary teachers can connect, get help, and encouragement for all kinds of education and parenting topics. You can find the show notes and links to all the resources mentioned in today's episode on my website at www.hopeineducation.com/podcast. And remember, a happy teacher is a good teacher. Until next time, teach joyfully and take care of you.